There is a 40-second moment in Season 2, Episode 15 of Avatar: The Last Airbender. The episode aired on September 29th, 2006. An old man climbs a hill at sunset carrying a picnic basket. He spreads a small cloth on the ground. He lights 2 sticks of incense with a touch of fire from his fingers. He places a portrait on the cloth. The portrait is of a young soldier. The man wishes him a happy birthday. Then he sings a song he had been singing all day, but this time the song breaks, and he cries. At the end of that 40-second moment, 4 words appear on screen, written in white text. They say, "In honor of Mako." The man on screen is Iroh, the man being honored. The actor who voiced him had died 10 weeks before that episode aired. His name was Mako Iwamatsu, and he died on July 21st, 2006, of esophageal cancer. The show never explains, anywhere, that the song was about him. That is the kind of show this is. People remember it as a children's cartoon about a boy who can fly. What it actually is, when you slow down and look at every layer underneath, is one of the most carefully constructed grief texts ever broadcast on a kids' network in the United States. And the further you go down, the stranger and darker it gets. What follows is a complete descent through that show. The things you already know are at the top. Below those, the things careful fans noticed. Below those, the things that take a rewatch and a wiki tab open to catch. Below those, the things the show implies but never confirms. And below those, the things almost no one talks about because they happen in production rooms and behind closed doors a year before the first episode aired, in a pilot that was never broadcast, in design choices that got cut and replaced. Before going deeper, a quick note. If you enjoy long-form sleep essays like this, subscribing helps the channel keep going. It is free and takes about 3 seconds. The first layer is the layer everyone knows. It is the part of a show you can summarize to a stranger in 2 sentences without spoiling anything important. A boy who could control air was frozen in a block of ice for 100 years. When he wakes up, the world has been at war the entire time he was asleep, and the people who started the war wiped out the rest of his kind while he was unconscious in the ice. He is the Avatar, the only person who can learn to bend all 4 elements, and the only one who can stop the war. That is the show in 2 sentences. The first episode of the series, called The Boy in the Iceberg, aired on February 21st, 2005 on Nickelodeon in the United States. It opens with a girl named Katara and her brother Sokka, fishing in a small canoe in the freezing water near the southern water tribe. They argue. Katara, frustrated, accidentally cracks open an enormous iceberg with a wave of water she did not know she could control. Inside the iceberg is a glowing boy with arrows tattooed on his head and hands. The boy is 12 years old. His name is Aang. He is the Last Airbender. The first time you see his eyes open, the entire backstory of the world bends around that single shot. The world has 4 nations. The water tribes live at the poles. The Earth Kingdom is the largest landmass and the largest population. The Fire Nation is an industrialized archipelago. The Air Nomads, peaceful monks who travel between 4 sky temples on flying sky bison, lived everywhere and nowhere. Each nation has people born with the ability to bend or telekinetically control the element of their nation. The Avatar is the one person born into each generation who can learn to bend all 4. The Avatar is reincarnated through the 4 nations in a fixed cycle, lifetime after lifetime, and the Avatar's job is to keep balance between the nations and between the human world and the spirit world. Aang, when frozen, was the latest Avatar in the cycle. He was an air nomad. He had just been told by the elder monks of the Southern Air Temple that he was the Avatar, and that the world was about to need him. He ran away. He flew into a storm. He fell into the ocean. The Avatar state, a defensive trance that activates when an Avatar is in mortal danger, encased him and his sky bison Appa in a sphere of ice. He stayed there for 100 years. While he slept, the Fire Nation, led by Fire Lord Sozin, used a once-in-a-century cosmic event called Sozin's Comet to wipe out every air nomad they could find. The comet enhances firebending power to the point that a single firebender, on the day the comet passes overhead, can do what an army normally does. The Fire Nation used those few hours to commit a genocide, Aang knows none of this when Katara cracks open the iceberg. He learns, episode by episode, that he is the only person of his kind left in the world. There is one episode in particular, very early in the first season, called The Southern Air Temple, where he flies home to where he grew up and finds his temple completely empty. He finds his mentor's body, a man named Monk Gyatso, who raised him. Gyatso's skeleton is on the floor of the meditation room, surrounded by the skeletons of Fire Nation soldiers wearing armor enhanced by the comet. The show shows you this in a quick shot. It does not linger on it. Aang sees it for less than a second. He never speaks of it again. That is the surface of the iceberg. A boy, an arrow on his head, a flying buffalo, a war he is supposed to end, a world he does not recognize, 3 seasons, 3 books, as the show calls them, named after the elements he must master in order. Book 1 is water, Book 2 is earth, Book 3 is fire. By the end of Book 3, Sozin's comet returns. The current Fire Lord Ozai plans to use the second pass of the comet to do what his great-grandfather Sozin did to the Air Nomads, but on a global scale. Aang has to stop him. 3 seasons of bending, training, and political intrigue and personal growth come down to a single confrontation on the day the comet passes overhead. Shh, that is the part you can summarize over coffee. That is what the show looks like from the surface. You also know, if you have ever watched a single episode, that the boy is not alone. Katara, the girl who freed him from the ice, becomes the most powerful waterbender of her generation. Her brother Sokka, who has no bending ability at all, becomes the strategic mind of the group, the one who plans, the one who fails, the one who keeps everyone alive when bending fails. They are joined later by a blind earthbender named Toph, who can sense vibrations through the ground with her feet, and who is small and rude and one of the most powerful earthbenders alive. There is the Prince of the Fire Nation, Zuko, who chases them across the world for 2 seasons trying to capture Aang to restore his honor, and who, in the 3rd seasons, switches sides. There is Zuko's uncle, Iroh, the man on the hill with the picnic basket, who follows Zuko everywhere and serves him tea and gives him advice. The 4 of them, plus Zuko later, are the team. The team has a flying bison named Appa and a winged lemur named Momo. That is the cast. You know that the show ends. You know there is a sequel called The Legend of Korra, set 70 years later, with a different avatar. You know there is a 2010 live-action film directed by M. Night Shyamalan that almost everyone hates. You know there is a Netflix live-action remake from the 2020s. You know there are continuations in graphic novel form. You know the original creators, Brian Konietzko and Michael Dante DiMartino, often called Bright by fans, made the show together over 5 years for Nickelodeon Animation Studios. You know the show was originally aired between February 2005 and July 2008. You know it has won an enormous number of awards. You know it is consistently on best of lists for the medium. You know it is the show people who do not normally like animated television will admit they cried at. That is the surface, that is the layer of ice you can see from the deck of the boat. To go below this, you do not need to know any obscure trivia, you only need to look at the show carefully. Most longtime fans, on a 2nd or 3rd rewatch, find the next layer. It is the layer where the show stops being about a boy in an iceberg and starts being about how the world worked before the war, and how every act of magic in the world has a history, an animal source. Bending in this world is not a generic superpower. Each element has a specific style and a specific origin. Earthbending was taught to humans by enormous blind subterranean creatures called badger moles, who can see through vibrations the same way Toph does. Toph, blind from birth, learned earthbending directly from badger moles when she ran away from home as a child. The first humans to ever earthbend, 2 lovers named Oma and Shu from rival villages, learned by watching the badger moles tunnel between mountains to meet each other in secret. Firebending was taught by dragons, real dragons, enormous, intelligent, skyborn, ancient dragons who breathed fire and understood the philosophy of fire as a creative force rather than a destructive one. By the time Aang wakes up, the Fire Nation has hunted the dragons to apparent extinction. There is an episode in the 3rd season, called the Firebending Masters, where Zuko and Aang travel to a hidden tribe called the Sun Warriors, who have secretly preserved two surviving dragons named Ren and Shaw, the last two dragons in the world. Ren and Shaw teach Zuko and Aang the original style of firebending, which is not about anger and rage, the way the Fire Nation military teaches it. It is about life and warmth and the conscious will to do good. The Fire Nation, in other words, has been doing firebending wrong for 100 years, because they killed the dragons who could have corrected them. Waterbending has no animal teacher. The original waterbenders are spirits, specifically the moon and the ocean, who in the deep mythology of this show have human avatars in the form of two koi fish that swim in an oasis at the heart of the Northern Water Tribe. The waterbender Yer, a princess of the Northern Water Tribe, gives up her own life at the end of the first season to bring the moon spirit back after a Fire Nation admiral, Zhao, kills it. She becomes the moon. She is the moon now. Sokka was in love with her. Airbending was taught by Sky Bison. Appa, the flying buffalo Aang, rode into the iceberg, is descended from the original airbenders of this world. The Sky Bison taught the first Air Nomads to fly. There is a moment, early in Book 1, when Aang explains that the relationship between an airbender and a Sky Bison is permanent, lifelong, and chosen by the bison, not the human. Appa chose Aang when Aang was a small boy and Appa was a calf. They have been together for 112 years, biologically. Past the four animal teachers, you find the lion turtles. Lion turtles are mentioned almost not at all in the original show until the final episodes. A lion turtle is, as the name suggests, a creature with the head of a lion and the body of an enormous turtle, larger than an island. In the deep prehistory of this world, lion turtles were the first protectors of mankind. Humans lived on their backs in cities, while spirits roamed the wild places of the earth. When humans needed to leave the lion turtle to gather food, the lion turtle would temporarily grant them the power to bend an element so they could survive in the wild. They would return the power when they came home. Bending originally was a gift the lion turtles gave humans on loan. The Avatar replaced this system. When the era of the Avatar began, the lion turtles agreed to relinquish their role as protectors of mankind, and the four animal teachers, the badger moles and dragons, and koi spirits of Sky Bison became the new sources of bending knowledge. Most of the lion turtles disappeared. By the time of the show, only one is left. Aang meets him in the final episodes of Book 3. The lion turtle gives Aang an even older, deeper power that predates the four bending arts. It is called energy bending. It is the ability to bend the energy in another person's body to remove or restore their bending entirely. Aang uses it on Fire Lord Ozai in the finale, and it is how the show resolves a problem that was almost impossible to solve any other way, which is the problem of how a 12-year-old pacifist defeats the genocidal dictator without killing him. Past the lion turtles, the Avatar cycle stretches backward, and the names of past avatars come into focus. Aang's immediate predecessor was Avatar Roku, a Fire Nation man who was Sozin's best friend and who failed to stop the war when he was alive. Before Roku was Avatar Koshi, an enormous Earth Kingdom woman who lived for 230 years, who once detached an entire peninsula from the mainland to save its people from invasion, and turned it into an island that still bears her name. Before Koshi was Avatar Kuruk of the Northern Water Tribe, who was lazy and arrogant and lost his fiancée to the spirit Ko the Face Stealer because he did not take his job seriously. Before Kuruk was Avatar Yanchen, an air nomad woman whose statues you can see in the air temples and whose name still carries weight in the Order of the White Lotus. The Order of the White Lotus is the next layer down. The White Lotus is a secret society of Grand Masters across all four nations, organized loosely around the strategy game Pai Sho, which is one of the few cultural practices that crosses national lines. Iroh is a member. So is King Bumi, Aang's childhood best friend, who is now over 100 years old and the king of the Earth Kingdom city of Omashu. So is Master Pakku, the waterbending master who teaches Katara in the Northern Water Tribe. So is Zhongzhang, a deserter from the Fire Nation army. So is Piandao, the swords master who teaches Sokka. the White Lotus exists across the war. It is the closest thing to a positive global institution in the world of the show, and Iroh is one of its highest-ranking members. The fact that Iroh is in the White Lotus means he has been working against the Fire Nation quietly for years before the show begins. He travels with Zuko not just because he loves his nephew, which he travels with him because he is positioning his nephew very slowly, very gently, to switch sides. That is the long game. You also know on this layer that Iroh once besieged the city of Ba Sing Se. He laid siege to the city for 600 days and broke through the outer wall, the only general in the history of the Fire Nation to do so, which he withdrew before he could take the inner city. The reason he withdrew is the next layer down. You know that King Bumi, Aang's friend, waited 100 years for him. Bumi, when Aang knew him, was a small mad genius child who saw the world through a particular flavor of insight that everyone else mistook for craziness. Aang did not see Bumi for 100 years. When he finally goes back to Omashu in the first season, Bumi is 112 years old, still alive, still mad, still ruling the city, and still able to crush boulders with his bare hands, which he recognized Aang the moment he saw him. He had been waiting that long. You know, by this layer, that the world has a deep history that the show only ever glances at. You know there are sandbenders in the Siwong Desert. You know the foggy swamp water tribe broke off from the northern and southern tribes thousands of years ago. You know the Sun Warrior civilization which preserved the dragons predates the Fire Nation by who knows how long. You know the Mechanist, the inventor at the Northern Air Temple, has been secretly providing weapon designs to the Fire Nation in exchange for the temple being left alone. And that his hot air balloon is the technological breakthrough that lets the Fire Nation invade by air for the first time. The Mechanist is one of the show's quiet, ethical question marks. He is not a villain, he just made the wrong deal. This is the layer where you start to understand that the war did not invent the world. The world is older than the war. The war is a recent event in a much longer history. This is where the show stops being something you can summarize and starts being something you have to feel. The man on the hill at the start of this video, the one with the picnic basket, and the song, his son's name was Lu Ten. Lu Ten was born during the 100-Year War. He was the only child of Iroh, who was, at the time of Lu Ten's birth, the crown prince of the Fire Nation, the firstborn son of Fire Lord Azulon, the brother of Ozai, and a celebrated general expected to inherit the throne and finish his nation's conquest of the world. Iroh raised his son to be a soldier. Lu Ten believed his nation's propaganda the same way Zuko did, the same way Azula did. He joined the army. He served under his father. In the year Iroh laid siege to Ba Sing Se, Lu Ten was on the front lines. He was at most a few years older than Zuko was when the show begins. In the moment Iroh's forces breached the outer wall of the city, the moment that in any other version of this story would have been the climax of his life's work. His son was killed somewhere on the battlefield. Iroh learned later. By the time Iroh learned, Lu Ten was already dead. The siege had lasted 600 days. Iroh withdrew his forces and went home. He never fought another war. That is the backstory, given in fragments, of the man on the hill in the episode that aired on September 29th, 2006. The episode is called The Tales of Ba Sing Se. It is the 15th episode of the second book. It is structured as 6 small vignettes, each following a different main character through a single day in the city. The day Iroh chooses to spend in the city is Lu Ten's birthday. He goes shopping for picnic supplies, he helps a crying child, he talks a mugger out of his career, he climbs a hill, he sets up the small altar, he sings. The song he sings is called Leaves from the Vine. The lyrics are about a small soldier boy marching home, drifting in the foam, falling on the ground, coming home in autumn. The song is about a young man who does not come back from a war. The song was written for Mako Iwamatsu specifically by the show's composers on the basis that Mako himself had served in the United States military as a young man before he became an actor, and that the show would treat him as a soldier coming home. In honor, Mako died of esophageal cancer on July 21st, 2006. He had recorded most of his lines for Season 2 before he died, Greg Baldwin took over the role for Season 3 and for the entire sequel series. The Tales of Ba Sing Se was the last episode for which Mako had been alive during recording, although the team re-recorded and modified parts of his vignette after his death to function as a tribute. The white text at the end of the segment, in honor of Mako, is the only acknowledgement in the show itself that anyone behind the show ever died. There is no other dedication anywhere across all 3 seasons. Just those 4 words, at the end of one quiet segment in a Saturday morning cartoon. There is a moment in that segment where Iroh is walking through Ba Sing Se and helps a young boy who has hurt himself. He picks up an instrument from a market stall and plays Leaves from the Vine to comfort the child. The instrument is a piper, a Chinese stringed instrument. Iroh plays it like a guitar. The animation team knew this was wrong. The instrument is meant to be held upright. They did it that way anyway, because Mako in real life played his instruments like a guitar. It was a small private memorial inside an episode that was already a memorial. You will not catch it unless you know it is there. The reason Iroh is so devoted to Zuko, the reason he follows him across the world, the reason he tolerates his nephew's anger and his nephew's mistakes and his nephew's cruelty, is that Iroh treats Zuko like his own son. He says this once, in the first season, in a small line of dialogue that almost slides past you. He says, "After my own son died, I began to think of you as my own." The whole show, every single moment iOS spends with Zuko, every cup of tea, every chess move, every small smile, is a man trying to save the second son after he failed to save the first. The whole arc of Zuko, the redemption that the entire fandom remembers as one of the great character arcs in television, exists because Iroh decided to give his second son the love he was not able to give his first in time. The reason Iroh is so good is that he failed once before. You will not see this on first watch, you will see a funny old man who likes tea. You only see the depth on the second pass in the 6th episode of the 3rd book, an episode called The Avatar and the Fire Lord, which aired on October 26, 2007. The show tells you in a single 25-minute episode the entire history of how the war began. It does this in flashback. Aang receives a vision from his predecessor Avatar Roku, who tells him it is time he learned the history. Zuko, on the other side of the world, receives a scroll from Iroh telling him to learn the same thing. The 2 storylines run in parallel, each character learning the same story from a different side. Roku and Sozin grew up together. They shared birthdays, they shared everything. On their 16th birthday, the Fire Sages arrived at the celebration and named Roku the Avatar. Sozin, who was the prince of the Fire Nation and would have inherited everything anyway, gave his best friend a parting gift before Roku left for his Avatar training. The gift was the hair ornament that the Crown Prince of the Fire Nation traditionally wears, an heirloom of the royal family. Sozin gave his Crown Prince ornament to Roku to wear during his journey, so that Roku, going alone into the world, would carry a piece of him. Roku spent 12 years away from home, mastering the 4 elements. He went to the Southern Air Temple, where he became close friends with a young air nomad named Gyatso, the same Gyatso who, decades later, would die surrounded by Fire Nation soldiers in the Air Temple, where he raised Aang. Roku and Gyatso were friends the way An and Bumi were friends, the way Iroh and his White Lotus members were friends. There is a line Roku says to Aang during this flashback episode. Looking at his old life, he says, "Some friendships are so strong they can even transcend lifetimes." The line lands the first time you hear it, but the line lands harder when you realize that Roku, an old man at the time he died, would later be reincarnated as Aang, and that Aang's first real mentor on his airbending journey would be Gyatso. The friendship did transcend a lifetime. Aang grew up loved by Roku's old friend, in the same temple, doing the same exercises, calling him the same name. The show never explains this. You have to put it together yourself. By the time Roku finished his training and returned to the Fire Nation, Sozin had become Fire Lord. The 2 of them reunited as best friends, but they were not boys anymore. At Roku's wedding to a woman named Ta Min, with Sozin himself as the best man, Sozin pulled Roku aside and made his pitch. He said, "The Fire Nation was prosperous." He said the Avatar and the Fire Lord working together could share that prosperity with the world. Roku refused. He told his oldest friend on his wedding night that the four nations were meant to be separate and that there would be no expansion, and that Sozin needed to abandon the idea entirely. Sozin smiled and said nothing. The friendship was already broken in that moment. Sozin just had not told him yet. Years passed. Roku eventually learned that Sozin had quietly invaded part of the Earth Kingdom and started building Fire Nation colonies. Roku confronted his oldest friend in the Fire Nation throne room. They fought. Roku won. He spared Sozin's life in the name of their friendship and warned him that any further step out of line would be his end. 25 years later, on Roku's home island, the volcano erupted. Roku evacuated the villagers and tried to fight the eruption itself, drawing on all four elements in the Avatar state to hold back the lava. Sozin, on the other side of the world, saw the smoke and flew his dragon to help. Two old men, two former friends, the Fire Lord and the Avatar, stood together against the volcano. For a moment they held it. Then Roku, who was already old by this point, was overcome by poisonous volcanic gas and collapsed. Sozin stood over his oldest friend, his unconscious body inches from the lava. Sozin had a choice. He chose. He left Roku to die. Roku died on the slope of his own volcano. 12 years later, in the very next moment of the Avatar cycle, Aang was born at the Eastern Air Temple, the next Avatar after Roku. By that point, Sozin had already begun preparing to use the comet. The comet arrived, the Air Nomads were exterminated. The war began. The episode ends with Sozin, an old man at the end of his life, writing his final testament. The last lines of the testament, the last lines of Sozin's life, are these. He writes, "I know he is hiding out there somewhere, the Fire Nation's greatest threat, the Last Airbender." The flashback ends on Sozin's ship sailing past a small sphere of ice on the surface of the Antarctic Ocean. Inside the sphere, a 12-year-old boy is asleep with his bison. Sozin's ship sails right past him. The hunter dies of old age without ever finding the prey. Then the episode reveals in the final beat that Zuko is the great-grandson of both Sozin and Roku at the same time. Sozin's son married Roku's daughter. The bloodline of the man who started the war and the man who tried to stop it merge in a single person, and that single person is the boy Aang has been chasing the entire show. Iroh tells Zuko in his prison cell that the conflict between Sozin and Roku lives on inside him, and that he alone has the power to end it. Once you have seen this episode, the entire show is rewritten. Every scene with Zuko becomes a scene about an ancestral fault line. Every scene with Iroh becomes a scene about a man trying to redirect his nephew toward the better of his two great-grandfathers. Every scene with Aang and Zuko together becomes a restaging of an old friendship that died on a volcano. The show, you realize, has been about this since episode 1. It just took 50 episodes to tell you. By the end of this layer, you are no longer thinking of Avatar as a children's adventure show. You are thinking of it as something else. Something the network probably did not fully understand they had bought. You go a little deeper, and what you find next is the layer of stories the show tells in single episodes and then never speaks of again. The standalone darkness, the parts that linger longer than the show seems to want them to. The most famous of these is an episode in the third book called The Puppet Master, which aired on November 9th, 2007. It was Avatar's Halloween episode. It is the episode in which the show for one night becomes a horror story. The team is traveling through the Fire Nation in disguise. They stop in a small foggy town in the woods where people have been disappearing on full moon nights. A kindly old woman named Hama runs the local inn and invites them to stay. She is sweet and grandmotherly. Sokka, who watches her closely, becomes unsettled by her without being able to say why. As the episode unfolds, Hama reveals that she is from the Southern Water Tribe. She is from Katara's tribe. She is one of the original waterbenders the Fire Nation captured during the early raids of the war, when Sozin's strategy of preempting the next Avatar required the systematic kidnapping of every waterbender in the Southern Water Tribe to prevent the Avatar, if he were a waterbender, from ever finding a teacher. Katara's grandmother, Kanna, fled the Southern Water Tribe to avoid these raids. Hama did not escape. She was captured. The Fire Nation built a metal prison for the captured waterbenders deep in the Fire Nation, in which the prisoners were kept entirely separate from any water. The cells had pumped dry air. The prisoners' arms and legs were bound when they were given water to drink. The prison was designed specifically to prevent waterbending. Hama was held there for decades. She watched everyone from her tribe die one by one until she was the last surviving southern waterbender in captivity. In the prison, Hama discovered something: water exists inside living bodies. Even in a cell with no available water, there is water. There is water in the rats that crawl into the cracks of the cell. There is water inside the guards. Hama, alone in a metal box, taught herself, over years, to bend the water inside other living things. She practiced first on the rats. She controlled their movements, tested the limits of what she could do. Then, on a night with a full moon, when waterbending power is at its strongest, she practiced on a guard. She forced him to walk against his will. She forced him to unlock her cage. She walked out of a prison that had been designed to make waterbending impossible, and she did it by inventing a new form of bending no one had ever performed before. The technique she invented is called bloodbending. It only works under a full moon. It is, on every level, a violation. To bloodbend a human is to take their body away from them, to use them as a puppet, to force their muscles to move against their will. Hama left the prison. She made her way slowly across the Fire Nation. She settled in this small, foggy town, and every full moon, for years, she would lure Fire Nation civilians into the woods, take their bodies away from them, and chain them up in an underground cave to slowly starve and die. She had been doing this for as long as she had been free. Katara discovers all of this. Hama tries to teach her. Hama tells her in a line that the show frames almost lovingly. She says, "You've got to keep an open mind, Katara. There is water in places you never think about." They fight in the woods under the full moon. Hama uses bloodbending on Aang and Sokka, controlling them like puppets, forcing them to attack Katara. Katara, to save her brother, is forced to use bloodbending herself. She uses it on Hama. She freezes her oldest tribeswoman in place by controlling the water in her body. Hama is captured. The villagers haul her away in chains. As they take her, Hama looks at Katara with the cold satisfaction of someone who has won, and she says, "My work is done. Congratulations, Katara. You are a bloodbender now." The episode ends with the team riding away in silence, except for Katara, who is crying. The thing about the Puppet Master is that the show never undoes it. Katara cannot unlearn bloodbending. Once she knows how to do it, she knows. In the next major arc, in the episode called The Southern Raiders, Katara uses bloodbending one more time. On the wrong person, on a Fire Nation captain who happened to be on the wrong road, on the wrong night. She uses it because she is hunting the man who killed her mother, and because she is 16 years old, and because she has not slept in days. The show treats this moment without celebration, which Katara's face during the bloodbending is the face of someone who has done something she will not forgive herself for. The show in the sequel series The Legend of Korra eventually has bloodbending criminalized internationally, in part because of what Hama and Katara unleashed. The show never lets you forget that Hama is, in some moral sense, a victim. She invented this technique because the Fire Nation tortured her and her people for decades. Her revenge is monstrous, but the show forces you to consider what monstrosity looks like in the third generation, after you have spent your whole life in a prison built specifically to deny you what you are. Bloodbending is the most disturbing power in the show, and it was invented by an old woman in a metal box, alone, by force of will, to escape a war crime. The show puts that backstory in your hands and walks away. There is a parallel episode in the same season where Katara confronts the man who killed her mother. The man's name is Yon Ra. He was a Fire Nation soldier, a low-ranking captain in the Southern Raiders, the same special force that took Hama. He was sent to the Southern Water Tribe to find any remaining waterbenders. He arrived at Katara's village. The only waterbender left was Katara herself, who was a small child, hidden by her mother. Yon Ra confronted Katara's mother Kia. Kia told him she was the waterbender to protect her daughter, which he killed her on the floor of her own home. Katara found the body afterward. Years later, Katara hunts Yon-Ra down. The episode in which this happens, The Southern Raiders, is the 16th episode of the third book and aired on October 17, 2008. Katara finds Yon-Ra living a small, ugly life with his mother in a quiet village. He is old now. He is pathetic. He does not even remember what his mother's killer looked like until the moment Katara, in the rain, in the dark, says, "I am the daughter of the woman you killed." Yon-Ra begs for his life. He admits he killed Kya, which he admits he was acting on orders. He says, "Take me, just spare my mother." Katara does not kill him. She does not forgive him either. The show is very deliberate about this. She lets him live, but she does not pretend he deserves to live. The episode ends with her telling Aang that forgiveness is not what the war gave her, but that vengeance was not what she wanted either. There is a third category, smaller and harder to name, between the two. Katara is in that category. The show leaves her there and does not explain it further. These are the things that lurk in the parts of the show that look, on first watch, like Adventure of the Week filler. The Puppet Master is filler. The Southern Raiders, before you understand who Yon-Ra is, sounds like a heist episode. They are not filler. They are the show putting the deepest possible moral questions into single episodes, and then walking quietly back to the main plot, as though it had not just done that. On the same layer, you find the deaths the show buries on purpose. The most notable is the death of a teenage boy named Jet. Jet appeared first in Book 1 as the leader of a group of orphaned Earth Kingdom resistance fighters called the Freedom Fighters. He was 16, charismatic, broken in ways the show only briefly explained. The Fire Nation had killed his parents in front of him when he was 8. He hated the Fire Nation with a hatred that, by the time the team meets him in Book 1, has become indistinguishable from cruelty. He convinces Aang and Sokka to help him in what he claims is a strategic strike, and only at the last second do they realize that Jet's plan is to destroy a dam upstream of an Earth Kingdom village so that the resulting flood will kill every Fire Nation soldier in the village. Jet, the protagonist who hates the Fire Nation, is willing to drown an entire village of Earth Kingdom civilians to do it. The team stops him. They leave him. Jet returns in Book 2 in a small arc set in Ba Sing Se. He has tried to reform. He has come to the city looking for a new life. He sees Iroh and Zuko, who are working at a tea shop in Ba Sing Se, under aliases, and recognizes them as Fire Nation. He is right. He tries to expose them. Iroh, who has connections in the city, manages to deflect the accusation. The Dai Li, the secret police of Ba Sing Se, takes Jet into custody. They take him to a place called Lake Laogai, an underground brainwashing facility hidden beneath an artificial lake. When the team meets Jet again, he does not remember what he is fighting for. He does not remember being a freedom fighter. He does not remember Smellerbee or Longshot, or any of his old comrades. He has been emptied. She breaks free of the brainwashing during a fight, and the show stages his death in one of its strangest sequences. He is hit by an attack from Lama Feng, the head of the Dai Li, in a way that the camera deliberately obscures. He falls. His friends gather around him. He says in a small voice, "I will be fine." Smellerbee, his oldest friend, looks at Aang and at Toph and shakes her head. No. Toph, who can sense lies through vibrations the way she senses everything, is silent. The team has to leave him. The Dai Li are coming. They run. The show never actually shows Jet die. The creators have confirmed in interviews that he died in that scene, that he could not be saved, that the show could not say so directly because it was a Nickelodeon program with strict rules about depicting child death. So they wrote it the way Hemingway would have written it. Toph senses the lie. Smellerbee shakes her head. The team has to keep moving. The next time Jet's name comes up in the show, it is past tense. Most viewers on first watch do not realize Jet died. The show buries him so thoroughly that you can finish the entire series without knowing. Once you know, the scene at Lake Laogai becomes one of the saddest moments in the show. A 16-year-old boy who was orphaned by war, who grew up to become a war criminal himself, who was brainwashed by the city he came to for refuge, dies in front of his oldest friends in a tunnel under a lake. And the show is structurally not allowed to tell you so. This is the layer where you start to notice that the show has more than one of these. The cabbage merchant, who appears across many episodes losing his cabbages to the chaos around the team, is mostly comic relief. But the show reveals in the final book that he is, in his own way, deeply traumatized by his constant brushes with the team. There is an enforcer who hunts the team for most of Book 3, a silent man with a third eye tattooed on his forehead who can fire a beam of explosive energy from his head by pointing his fingers like a gun. The show calls him the Combustion Man, and the team comes to call him that too. But the official Avatar materials reveal that his name was Sparky Boom Man during early development, and that the writers fought to keep him as nameless as possible because his namelessness made him scarier. He dies when his own technique is reflected back into him by Sokka, and his head explodes off-screen, which the show stages in shadow, which is to say, the show kills a man on screen by causing his head to explode and then implies it without showing it, in a children's program. You start to suspect, at this layer, that the show has been quietly killing people the entire time, in a way the network's content reviewers either did not notice or could not explain why they should be uncomfortable about. The body count is much higher than the rating suggests. The show is rated for children 7 and older. It depicts genocide, torture, brainwashing, ethnic cleansing, child soldiers, suicide bombing, the bloodbending of innocents, the death of a major teenage character at the hands of a brainwashing secret police, and the slow mental disintegration of a 14-year-old girl. It does all of this in a way that mostly does not register as disturbing on first watch, because it is animated, and because the music is gentle, and because the colors are warm. That 14-year-old girl is the next thing on the descent. Past the layer of theory and quiet horror, you reach the layer of symbolism the show does not name out loud. The show is full of these. There are entire viewing communities organized around them. Princess Azula, the antagonist of the second and third books, the daughter of Fire Lord Ozai, the sister of Zuko, is a 14-year-old prodigy when the show begins. She is one of the most dangerous firebenders in the world. She can produce blue fire instead of orange, which is the show's visual shorthand for a level of firebending intensity beyond what almost any other bender can produce. She can produce lightning, which is an even more advanced form of firebending. She is a perfect strategist. She is, on the surface, the show's villain, in the same way Zuko was the surface villain in Book 1. The show puts her in the spotlight for 2 seasons. The thing the show does very slowly across those 2 seasons is reveal that Azula is not a villain in the way the show's other villains are. She is a child who has been raised by a father who saw her as an heir and a weapon into a person who cannot lose. She has built her entire identity around being the better child, the prodigy, the one chosen by Ozai over Zuko. She has friends, but the friends are friends through fear. She has a mother she does not believe loved her. She has a brother she has been competing with since they were small. She has, through the show, projected the appearance of total control onto everything she does. In the final episodes of the third book, in the lead up to Sozin's comet, Azula becomes Fire Lord. Her father, Ozai, intending to use the comet to burn the Earth Kingdom, gives her the throne in his place and gives himself the new title of Phoenix King. From the moment Azula is alone in the palace, the show begins to break her. She cannot sleep. She begins to see the ghost of her dead mother in a mirror. She accuses everyone around her of betraying her. She banishes the Dai Li. She banishes her own servants. She accuses a piece of fruit of being lopsided. She cuts her own hair, which is one of the most visually striking moments in the show, sitting alone on the floor of her enormous bedroom, hacking off her own bangs with a pair of scissors, eyes empty. By the time Zuko and Katara fight her in the final battle, Azula has lost her mind. She is 14. She is screaming. The duel between her and Zuko is filmed like a duel between equals, with Mai missing, with friends missing, with the comet enhancing her power to a level Zuko cannot match. Zuko takes a lightning bolt for Katara to save her. Katara, in the rain, in a sewer drain, defeats Azula by freezing her to a grate and then chaining her to it. Azula, in chains, sobs in the rain. The show shows you this. Azula, the perfect prodigy, the firebending genius, the daughter Ozai chose, is 14 and broken and crying on a wet courtyard. The show ends and never returns to her. The thing about Azula is that the show implies, without saying directly, that she was never a villain in the way her father was. She was a girl raised by a man who saw her as a tool. She mirrored him because mirroring him was how she survived. The show does not redeem her the way it redeems Zuko. The show is honest enough to say that some children do not survive being raised by a man like Ozai, even when they appear to thrive. Azula is what thriving looks like inside that house. The show forces you to sit with that in the quiet after the war has been won. The other piece of buried symbolism on this layer is Aang's training under a guru. There is an episode in the second book, the last episode of the second book in fact, called The Guru, which aired together with Crossroads of Destiny, the final two-parter of Book 2. In that episode, Aang goes to the Eastern Air Temple to study under a guru named Pathik, who teaches him about the 7 chakras. The 7 chakras are points along the spine, derived from the original Indian framework, that must each be unblocked in sequence for a person to access their highest spiritual potential. For the Avatar specifically, all 7 chakras must be unblocked for the Avatar to control the Avatar state at will, rather than being a passive vehicle for it. Aang goes through 6 of the 7. Each one represents a personal confrontation. The Earth chakra is fear, the Fire chakra is shame, the Air chakra is grief, the Water chakra is guilt, the Sound chakra is lies, the Light chakra is illusion. He works through all of them. With great difficulty, the Grief chakra in particular forces him to confront the genocide of his people in a way he had been avoiding for the entire show. He sits with it. He weeps. He moves through. The 7th chakra, which the guru tells him will allow him full conscious control of the Avatar state, is the chakra of cosmic energy. The blockage of the 7th chakra is earthly attachment. To open the 7th chakra, the guru says, Aang must let go of the thing he is most attached to in this world. Aang, in that moment, sees a vision. The vision is of Katara. She is in danger somewhere far away. She is being captured. She is calling for help. He must not save her. He must release his attachment to her if he wants to gain mastery of the Avatar state. The guru says, these are the rules. The rules are not negotiable. Aang chooses Katara. He breaks the meditation, which he flies away from the temple. By doing so, he closes the 7th chakra completely. The guru calls after him. The episode ends. In the very next episode, Crossroads of Destiny, Aang fails to access the Avatar state at the moment he needs it most. Azula shoots him in the back with lightning. He dies. The show ends the second book on Aang's death with the Avatar state leaving him. The cycle of reincarnation in that moment is technically broken. Katara, who Aang chose to save, uses water from the spirit oasis to bring him back. She is the reason he survives. The choice he made to keep Katara is the only reason he lives long enough to reach the 3rd book at all. The show is asking you a question in this 2-episode arc that almost no other children's show has ever asked. It asks you whether the right thing to do is to follow the spiritual rules or to break them for love. The show, by Aang's choice, breaks them for love. The show, by Katara saving him, rewards him for it. The show is not didactic about this. It just shows you the trade-off and lets you sit with it. Shh. There is one more piece of symbolism on this layer, the one that lives at the very edge of the show's mythology. Ho, the face stealer, is a spirit who lives in a hollow tree at the heart of the spirit world. He looks like a centipede with a human face. He has thousands of faces. Every face he wears is a face he stole from someone whose spirit he encountered, showing emotion. To survive an encounter with Ko, you must keep your face perfectly blank. Aang meets him in Book 1 in the episode Winter Solstice, Part 2, Avatar Roku. Aang barely survives. He keeps his face still by force of will. Ko casually mentions during the encounter that he has stolen the face of a previous Avatar's lover. The Avatar he is referring to is Avatar Kuruk, who lived hundreds of years before. Kuruk's fiancée, a woman named Ami, was killed by Ko on her wedding day. Ko keeps her face on his collection of faces, a souvenir of one of his most successful hunts. Kuruk has been looking for her in the spirit world for centuries. The Avatar before Aang, 4 reincarnations back, is still in the spirit world hunting his murdered fiancée, whose face has been stolen by an immortal spirit who lives in a tree. The show drops this in conversation in a season, one episode without underlining it, and never picks it up again. The Korra sequel series eventually does pick it up. There is a graphic novel set after Korra, in which Kurik returns to the spirit world and tries one more time to recover Umi's face. He does not succeed. The face stays in Ko's collection. The avatar before Aang spent the entire span of Aang's lifetime and his avatar predecessor's lifetime, and the lifetime before that, looking for the face of the woman he loved, and never finds her. The show told you this in passing in Book 1 and then walked away. You are supposed to find it on your own. By this point in the descent, the show has stopped feeling like a children's program at all. It feels like something the network bought without entirely understanding what they had bought. Once you have noticed Azula's hair and Aang's chakra and Ko's collection, you cannot unnotice them. They are everywhere. The deeper you go from here, the more the show stops being a thing the show is showing you and starts being a thing the show is hiding. This is the layer where the production starts bleeding through the fiction. The Air Nomad genocide is, in the world of the show, the inciting incident of the entire war. The genocide takes one episode to depict, the third episode of the first book, called The Southern Air Temple, which aired on February 25th, 2005. In that episode, Aang flies home to the Southern Air Temple for the first time since waking from the Iceberg. He has not yet accepted that he is the last of his people, which he believes the temple will still be there. The show stages his arrival as one of the most quietly devastating sequences in animation. He flies up the steps, he calls for Gyatso, he gets no answer. He walks deeper into the temple. The wind moves through abandoned halls. Toys rust in courtyards. He calls out for the friends he grew up with, the boys he used to play airball with, by name. None of them answer. Then he sees the body. Gyatso's skeleton is on the floor of the meditation hall. Around him are the skeletons of multiple Fire Nation soldiers in armor with the comet markings still on their helmets. The implication, which the show does not need to spell out, is that Gyatso, an old pacifist monk who taught children to fly, killed multiple comet-enhanced firebenders before he died. He fought. He was an air nomad. He killed. The skeletons around him are the skeletons of men who did not survive killing him. This is the show, at its center, telling you what genocide looks like in the slowest and most gentle frames it can manage. A floor, an old man. The men who killed him, also dead. Aang sees this for less than a second. He goes into the avatar state. The temple shakes. Katara talks him down. Aang, when he comes out of it, does not speak about what he saw. The show, for the rest of Book 1, does not make him grieve out loud. It is one of the bravest decisions the show ever made. Aang, the protagonist of an entire children's series, suffered the genocide of his people in his absence, and the show does not give him a long mourning monologue. The show lets the silence carry it. The genocide itself is more thorough than the show ever fully depicts on screen. The episode of Sozin's Testament reveals that after the initial attack on the air temples, some air nomads escaped and went into hiding in the Earth Kingdom. Sozin, knowing this, ordered Fire Nation operatives to take air nomad relics from the temples and use them to bait small caves and ruins across the Earth Kingdom, dressing the caves to look like hiding places where airbender refugees might shelter. Sozin's spies then spread rumors about these supposed safe houses among the Earth Kingdom population, knowing that any surviving airbender would eventually find their way to one. When refugees arrived, expecting to find their kin, they were ambushed and killed. This continued for years. The genocide, in other words, was not a single act. It was a single act and then a sustained campaign of deception and pursuit designed to leave no airbender alive on the planet. Aang was the only known survivor of all of this. By the time the show begins, he is, biologically, a 12-year-old boy carrying the entire weight of his civilization on his shoulders. He does not know any of the details. The audience knows. The audience watches him interact with people who do not understand what he has lost, who treat him like a child, who scold him for not focusing on his training. Every scene with Aang in the first season has this layer underneath it if you know to look. The boy does not know the scale of what happened to his family. He suspects. He is not told, but learns it across the show, in fragments, and the show is structured so that the audience learns it ahead of him. This is where the production bleeds through. There is a behind-the-scenes detail that explains why so much of Book 3 feels different from Book 2. Mako Iwamatsu, the man who voiced Iroh, died on July 21st, 2006, between Book 2 and Book 3. He had been a working actor in Hollywood for over 40 years, which he had been nominated for an Academy Award for The Sand Pebbles in 1966. He had voiced characters in Conan the Barbarian and on Sesame Street. He was, by the time he was cast as Iroh, an elder of his profession, and his voice carried the weight of a man who had lived through enough to know what the character was carrying. When Mako died, the show had a problem. Iroh is one of the most central characters in the show. The third book is structurally built around him. The show could not write him out. The show also could not pretend his voice had not changed. The production response was Greg Baldwin, an actor whose specialty is voice impression and who had worked with Mako and studied his speech patterns directly. Baldwin took over Iroh for Book 3 and for the entire sequel series. He matched Mako's voice as closely as he could. The transition is barely audible. If you do not know about Mako's death, you will not notice that the voice changes between Book 2 and Book 3. If you do know, you can hear the small differences. Baldwin's Iroh is slightly clearer, slightly more crisp. Mako's Iroh had a roughness to it that came from a 63-year-old man with esophageal cancer. The roughness is gone in Book 3. The show does not announce that the voice has changed. The show just continues. The dedication at the end of the Tales of Ba Sing Se, in honor of Mako, is the only acknowledgement the show ever makes that Mako died. The team chose that segment for the dedication because it was the last segment Mako had been alive during recording, and because the segment, as written, was already about a man mourning a son. They added the dedication after the fact. They reanimated parts of the segment to give it more weight. They knew when they made the segment final that they were making a tribute to two people at once. The fictional Lu Ten, dead at 25 at the siege of Ba Sing Se. The real Mako Iwamatsu, dead at 73 at his home in California. There are other production marks the show carries from this period. The episode count for Book 3 was longer than originally planned. The team had ideas they wanted to develop further. The team knew Mako's death made Book 3 harder, and they leaned into the difficulty rather than around it. The show ends with Iroh leading the assault to retake Ba Sing Se from the Fire Nation, the same city where his son had died decades before, the same city he had besieged. He does it with the White Lotus. He does it surrounded by old men he has known for 40 years. He does it gently. The show ends his arc in the place his son died. This is not subtle. It is the most deliberate piece of writing in the entire show. Iroh comes home in the world of the fiction to the city where his son was buried and finishes the war as a free man with his old friends. Mako, by that point, was already gone. Greg Baldwin gives the final speeches. They sound like Mako. They are not. There are also the things the show was not allowed to show. Nickelodeon, in the mid-2000s, had specific rules about violence in children's animated programs. Direct on-screen death was banned, bleeding was banned. The show, as a result, developed its visual language around these constraints. People do not bleed in Avatar. They are knocked unconscious. They are frozen. They are buried in stone. They fall off cliffs. They are blood-bended into a kind of paralysis. Death, when it happens off-screen, or in shadow, or behind a wall. The deaths that do happen are creative responses to those constraints. Combustion Man, the bounty hunter with the third eye, dies when his own technique is reflected back into him by Sokka throwing a boomerang at the right angle. The explosion is shown in silhouette. His head explodes. The show does not show his head exploding. It shows the silhouette. The audience, watching, fills in what they cannot see. Zhao, the Fire Nation admiral who killed the Moon Spirit at the end of Book 1, is pulled into the spirit world by the Ocean Spirit at the end of that same episode. His death is staged as a haunting. The water rises around him, hands reach up from inside the wave, he is dragged under. The show does not show him drowning. It shows a suggestion of drowning. Lao Beifong, Toph's father, never knows where his daughter is for 2 seasons because the show is constrained from showing the kind of detective work that would make her trackable. Hama, the bloodbender, is shown bloodbending 2 characters who are children, An and Sokka, at full force, and the show does not show their faces during the bloodbending, because the team knew that showing 12-year-old faces in agony being controlled by an old woman would not survive a Nickelodeon review. The show has Sokka Grunt. The show has Aang Strain. The show keeps the camera on Hama and on Katara. The horror is communicated by the absence of the close-up. This is craft. This is the show working around the constraints. There is one specific scene that almost did not air. In the second book, in the season premiere called The Avatar State, Princess Azula, who has just been ordered by her father to capture her brother and uncle alive, is on the deck of her ship. A captain behind her casually mentions in front of her crew that her targets Zuko and Iroh are royal prisoners. The captain has just leaked classified information. The original storyboard had Azula turn around, raise a hand, and vaporize the captain on the spot as a demonstration of the cost of indiscretion. Nickelodeon objected. The team retained the moment but reduced its intensity. In the final aired version, Azula gives the captain a long, cold look, but she does not vaporize him. The implication remains. The horror remains. The act itself was cut. Years later, in the 2024 Netflix live-action remake, the same scene was rewritten. The captain still leaks the information. This time, he is killed. The Netflix series, with looser rules, allows what the original animated show could only imply. The original team had to find a way to communicate menace without crossing the line. They did. Azula's stillness in that scene, the way she does not move, the way she just stares at the man, is more frightening than the vaporization would have been, in part because the show had to invent it instead of executing it. This is what the show is on this layer. A children's program with a built-in layer of restraint. The restraint is the form. The restraint shaped what the show became. The restraint is why grown adults rewatch the show 15 years later and find new things in it. Because the restraint forced the show to encode meaning into things you have to find rather than things you are told. Below this is the deepest layer. This is the layer that is not in the show at all. This is the layer that lives in interviews, in documents, in art books, in the streamed unaired pilots. The show as it exists today, with 3 seasons and 61 episodes, is not the show the original creators pitched to Nickelodeon. The show they pitched in 2003 was an unaired pilot called Avatar: The Last Airbender, with a different voice cast, with several different character names, with a different tone, and with several characters who were never going to exist in the eventual show. The pilot was created in 2003 by Brian Konietzko and Michael Dante DiMartino over a period of months, animated at Tin House in Korea, and used to sell the concept to the Nickelodeon executives. It was never broadcast. For years, fragments of it appeared on bonus DVDs and on YouTube. Nickelodeon eventually streamed the entire pilot on Twitch in 2020, the first time most fans had ever seen the entire thing in one piece. In the pilot, Aang is voiced by Mitchell Musso. Mitchell Musso, by the time the show actually aired in 2005, would become better known for playing Oliver Oaken in Hannah Montana, which premiered on the Disney Channel in 2006. The Aang of the pilot sounds older, gruffer, more confident. The Aang of the broadcast show is voiced by Zach Tyler Eisen, who was younger, sweeter, more uncertain. The change is not minor. The Aang of the pilot is a swaggering hero. The Aang of the show is a child carrying a continent on his shoulders. The casting change shaped the entire personality of the protagonist. Mitchell Musso's Aang would not have cried at Gaiatsa's body the way Zach Tyler Eisen's Aang did. In the pilot, Katara is not named Katara, she is named Kia. The character is the same. The voice actress is the same. The name is different. Kaya was the name of Katara's mother, the woman Yon Raya would later kill. In the show that eventually aired, the name Kaya was kept for the mother and the daughter was renamed Katara. The reason for the change was a copyright issue. There was a 2002 video game called Kia: Dark Lineage, published by Atari, with a protagonist named Kia. Nickelodeon's legal department asked the team to avoid potential conflict. The original creators considered Kana, the name of Katara's grandmother, before settling on Katara. Both Kia and Kana stayed in the show as the names of family members. The grand erasure of the original name became 3 generations of the same family, carrying pieces of it. Katara, Kana, Kia. The show kept all three. You can look it up. In the pilots, the Avatar state works completely differently. Aang activates it casually, on purpose, as a combat ability. He uses it to win a fight with Zuko on the side of an enormous statue. He runs across the surface of the statue with his eyes glowing. He is in full control. The show, when it actually aired, made the Avatar state far more sacred. Aang, in the broadcast show, fears the Avatar state. He cannot control it. The Avatar state in the actual show is a thing he must master through the 7 chakras, and the loss of attachment, which is a thing he refuses to do for love. The pilot Aang would have walked into the Avatar state on day 1 and ended the war by Friday. The broadcast Aang spends 3 seasons learning to even survive being in it. In the pilot, there is no Iroh. Zuko in the pilot travels alone, with no uncle, with only his crew. Iroh did not exist when the pilot was made. The team had not yet realized that Zuko needed a parental figure to anchor his arc. When they added Iroh later, the original conception was that Iroh would be Zuko's master, his teacher, with the title Sifu Iroh, where Sifu is a title meaning master in Mandarin. He was not going to be related to Zuko at all. The team decided, late in development, to make Iroh Zuko's uncle, his blood family, and to give him the lost son, Lu Ten, as the source of his pain. The entire moral spine of the show, the relationship between Iroh and Zuko, the song on the hill, the line about the second son, did not exist in the pilot at all. It was added in revision. The single greatest character in the show was a late addition. In the pilot, in the opening sequence, there is a brief shadowed appearance of a large, muscular 16-year-old earthbender, who would have been the show's 3rd member of the team. That character was named Toph. The original Toph was a teenage boy, jock archetype, loud, abrasive, designed to be a foil to Sokka's nerdiness. He was not blind, he was not small, he was not a girl. He was a slab of muscle who would have spent the show insulting people. The team developed this version of the character through most of pre-production. The shift to a small blind girl came late, from head writer Aaron Ehash, who pitched, half-jokingly, that it would be funnier to see a tiny 12-year-old girl take out enormous earthbender champions in arenas than to see another buff guy do it. Ryan Konietzko, the co-creator, initially disagreed. He preferred the original boy version. He argued against the change. The change was made anyway. Toph, as the world knows her, is a female character because Aaron Ehash pushed for the joke. Konietzko, in subsequent interviews, has said that Toph eventually became one of his favorite characters in the show, and that the original boy version would have been a worse show. The boy design did not disappear, however. Pieces of it survived as the character of the Boulder, the wrestler Toph defeats in her debut episode. Pieces of it survived as Sud, an earthbender Roku trained under briefly seen in Book 3. Pieces of it survived as the actor playing Toph in the play within the show, The Ember Island Players, where Toph is portrayed by a giant strongman. The original design was not erased, it was cut up and distributed across other characters. The same thing happened to Princess Azula. In the earliest concepts, the antagonist's sister was male, named Azul. The team developed her as a male character before deciding, late in pre-production, to flip the gender. The reasons were structural. The team wanted Zuko's antagonist to be a sibling who could match him in every dimension that the family had been raised in, and the team wanted that antagonist to also be a girl, partly to undermine the audience's assumption that the family villain in this kind of show would always be a brother. Azul became Azula. The character we know is the second draft. Like with Toph, the masculine elements of the original were not deleted. Azula's posture, her physical carriage, the way she walks, retained traces of the original Azul. The show became more interesting because of the change. There were entire episode concepts that did not survive development. There was an idea for a special focused on Iroh's failed siege of Ba Sing Se, told entirely from Iroh's perspective, set during the war years before the show begins. The Avatar Extra's commentary on Book 1 references this idea explicitly. The team kicked it around. It never got made. There was an idea in the early concepts that Aang's parents would be revealed, that Aang would have a backstory anchored not just in the Air Nomad temples, but in the specific airbender father and mother. The team eventually dropped it. Aang's parents are never named in the show, which he is by design a child of the temple, raised by Gyatso with no biological lineage attached. The show implies that this is normal for Air Nomads. that the temple is the family. The original concept had wanted to make this less abstract. The team pulled back. There was a planned arc in early development in which Aang and Sokka would have been handcuffed together for an entire episode. Doing the buddy cop thing? It was discussed. It was dropped. There was a concept for a more bittersweet ending to the Kyoshi Warriors arc in Book 1, in which the team would have retreated from a burning village to escape Zuko's pursuit. It was changed. The actual episode, Warriors of Kyoshi, ends on a more triumphant note. The 2010 live-action film, directed by M. Night Shyamalan, is the part of the iceberg most fans wish they could forget. The film compresses the entire first book into a single 90-minute movie. It miscasts the leads, it pronounces the names differently from the show, even when those names are spoken on screen. It removes the comedy, it removes the lightness, it removes most of what made the show what it was. The original show creators Brian Konietzko and Michael Dante DiMartino were involved in the early stages, but were eventually pushed out of significant creative control. The film grossed enough money for studios to keep talking about a sequel for years, but the sequel never came. The show creators have, in interviews since, distanced themselves from the film completely. The film is canonically not part of the Avatar continuity. The film, by the consensus of the fanbase and the creators, did not happen. The 2024 Netflix live-action remake, by contrast, was developed with the original creators initially involved, but they left during development over creative differences with the streaming platform. The remake aired without their involvement. It is more faithful to the source material than the 2010 film, and the production values are higher, but the original team is on record saying it is not their version. The original team has since signed an exclusive deal with Avatar Studios, a Nickelodeon animation subsidiary, where they continue to develop new animated content set in the same world. The animated future of the franchise is the teams. The live-action versions are not. This split between media has become its own iceberg layer. There is the canon, there is the live-action film that is not canon. There is the Netflix series that is faithful but not by the original team. There is the new animated content that is canonically continuing the original. Then, there is Aaron Ehash. Ehash, the head writer of the original show, the man who pushed for Toph to be a girl, the man who shaped a great deal of the second and third books, left the team after the original show ended. He went on to create The Dragon Prince, a Netflix animated series that is, structurally, his attempt at a second Avatar. The Dragon Prince does many things Avatar did with different characters. Ehaz did not work on The Legend of Korra, the direct sequel series. The Korra team was Konietzko and DiMartino. Without him, many fans, after the original show ended, came to believe that Ehaz was the unsung backbone of the writing room, and that Korra's quality, where it suffers because Ehaz was not there. The Korra team disputes this in interviews. The truth is contested. The split is real. The show that you love, in many specific scenes you can name, was shaped by a writer the public cannot easily attribute it to. Korra, the sequel series, eventually retconned a great deal of the original mythology. The lion turtles in Korra are revealed to be the original sources of human bending. In the original Avatar, bending came from the four animal teachers. The lion turtles were not the source. They were a late introduced power that gave Aang energy bending. Korra retroactively made them the foundation of the entire system. This created friction in the fanbase. Some fans accept the retcon. Others consider it a hasty addition that does not match the lore the original show had established. The argument has been ongoing for over a decade. There is no resolution. The two shows are canonically continuous, but the foundation of bending was rewritten between them. You can decide for yourself which version you prefer. This is the flaw of the iceberg. There is no deeper layer of canonical material to descend into. Below this, there are only fan theories and internal arguments. Below this, the show ends. The story stops. What remains is what each viewer carries away, and how each viewer reconstructs what they saw the second time, and the third, and the fifth. There is one more pocket of material on this floor that almost no one talks about, and it lives in the books and graphic novels and supplementary material the show generated after it ended. The Avatar before Roku was Avatar Koshi. the enormous Earth Kingdom woman who lived for 230 years. The show treats Koshi as a side mention, a name on a list of past avatars, until Book 2 when Aang travels to Koshi Island and meets the Koshi warriors and learns about the woman who once detached the peninsula from the mainland. In the show itself, Koshi appears briefly through the Avatar state, in the episode Avatar Day, where she possesses Aang to defend herself against a charge of murder leveled against her hundreds of years after her death. She admits to Aang and to a Kyoshi Island village court that she did kill the man she was accused of killing. She killed him because he was a tyrant, because he was Chin the Conqueror, because he refused to back down, and because the only available technique that could end his conquest of the Earth Kingdom in time was to detach his entire army from the continent by carving the peninsula away. She killed him by giving him a choice between retreat and death. He chose death. Koshi shrugs about it. She says, "Only justice will bring peace." She does not apologize. The show, in 3 minutes of screen time, made Kyoshi one of the most morally interesting avatars in the entire cycle. Years after the show ended, in 2019, the team commissioned a series of novels by author F. C. Yi, beginning with the rise of Koshi, that filled in her backstory in detail. Koshi in the books is revealed to have grown up an orphan, abandoned by her parents in the Earth Kingdom, raised on the streets, eventually adopted by the previous Avatar Yang Chen's Darfei criminal contacts who recognized her as the new Avatar before the official sages did. Kyoshi spent her early life as an outlaw. The books treat the Avatar role not as a noble destiny, but as a rough trade full of compromises and necessary violence, and Koshi is a person who learns the hard way that the Avatar is not always the moral clean hand the world hopes for. The books are, by consensus, some of the best supplementary material the franchise has produced, and the Kyoshi presented in them is consistent with the Kyoshi the original show drew in her 3 minutes of screen time. She was not nice. She was effective. There is a difference. There are also the graphic novels that pick up immediately after the show ends. The first set, called The Promise, deals with the question of what to do with the Fire Nation colonies in the Earth Kingdom after the war. The colonies have been there for so many decades that the residents are no longer just Fire Nation occupiers. They are mixed, they are intermarried, they are second-generation children who do not remember a homeland that is not the colony. The Earth King wants them all sent home. Aang, the Avatar, has to mediate. The graphic novel treats this with the seriousness it deserves. There is no clean answer. The colonies eventually become the United Republic of Nations, which is the setting of The Legend of Korra, headquartered in Republic City. The transition from war to multinational state is canonically the work Aang spends most of his adult life on, alongside Zuko, in the years after the original show ends. The second set, called The Search, deals with what happened to Zuko's mother, Ursa. The original show implies that Ursa was banished from the Fire Nation by Ozai. The graphic novel reveals the answer. Ursa was the granddaughter of Roku, the previous Avatar. She had been forced into a political marriage with Ozai because of her bloodline. After her own son Zuko was born, and after Azula was born, and after Ozai's increasing cruelty became unbearable, Ursa made a deal with Ozai. She agreed to leave the Fire Nation forever, to never see her children again, in exchange for Ozai not killing the heir to the throne, his own father, Azulon, who had ordered Ozai to kill Zuko as punishment for an earlier insubordination. The deal was that Ursa left, Ozai kept Zuko alive, Ozai murdered his father Azulon to take the throne, and the Fire Nation continued the war for another decade. Ursa, in the graphic novel, has spent the intervening years living quietly in a small Earth Kingdom village, with a different face, a different husband, and a different daughter. The Mother of Faces, a spirit deeper in the spirit world than Ko, gave her a new face in exchange for forgetting her old life. Azula, who has been hunting her own mother across the spirit world, finally meets her. The reunion is one of the most painful sequences in the entire franchise. These details are not in the show. The show implies them, the graphic novels confirm them. Whether they are canon depends on the reader, but they are written by the original creative team and approved by Konietzko and DiMartino. Past these, there are smaller details that fans dig out of the show on rewatch and that the supplementary material confirms. The cabbage merchant, the running comedic figure who appears in 12 different episodes losing his cabbages to the chaos of the team, has a real name in the supplementary material. He is named Cabbage-san. His first appearance is in the second episode of Book 1. His last appearance is in the 15th episode of Book 2 in the Tales of Ba Sing Se, where Iroh, of all people, is briefly the customer of his cabbage stall. The merchant, by then, has tracked the team's path of destruction across an entire continent and has finally settled in the only place he assumes they cannot reach, the inner city of Ba Sing Se. He is wrong. The team is in the city by the next episode. The cabbage merchant, by canonical implication, has been ruined by the protagonist of the show across approximately 1 year of in-world time. Some fans have argued, semi-seriously, that he is the real victim of the entire war. There is the episode in Book 2, called The Library, the 10th episode of Book 2, in which the team travels to a hidden library in the Saiwam Desert run by a knowledge spirit named Wan Shitong, who has the appearance of an enormous black owl. Wan Shitong is one of the oldest spirits in the Avatar world. He keeps a library that is meant for genuine seekers of knowledge, not for people who want to use knowledge for war. The team enters the library to look for information that will help them defeat the Fire Nation. Wan Shitong, who detects their intent, considers them dishonest. The library begins to sink into the sand. The team escapes with their lives, but loses Sokka's library research. The library, with all its accumulated knowledge of the Avatar world, is canonically still buried under the desert. None of the books in it have been recovered. The library is one of the most specific examples in the show of the show telling you casually that there are entire civilizations of accumulated knowledge that the war has cost, and that no one is going to recover. In the same episode, Sokka's research uncovers the date of an upcoming solar eclipse. Firebending depends on the sun. Firebenders during a solar eclipse lose their bending entirely. The eclipse is the basis for the team's planned invasion of the Fire Nation, which becomes the centerpiece of Book 3. The Day of Black Sun, the 10th and 11th episodes of Book 3, depict the invasion in detail. It involves Sokka's father Hakoda, the Southern Water Tribe warriors, the Mechanist submarines, and the fragmented resistance the team has built up across the second book. The eclipse arrives. Firebending fails. The team has 8 minutes to find Ozai and end the war. They do not find him. Ozai has retreated to a bunker, and Azula, who has anticipated the entire invasion, is waiting in his throne room. The eclipse passes. Firebending returns. The invasion fails. The team's adult allies are captured. The team retreats to the Western Air Temple to regroup with Zuko, who has just defected. This is the moment, structurally, where Book 3 pivots from the team's plan to defeat Ozai, together with allies, into the team's plan to defeat Ozai alone. Hakoda, Sokka's father, becomes a prisoner of war. Bato, his second-in-command, is taken with him. The Mechanist is taken. Pipsqueak and the Duke from Jet's old crew are taken. By the end of the Day of Black Sun, the only adults free in the world who can fight are Iroh, who is in his own prison, and the White Lotus, who are scattered. The team is on its own. The captured allies, including Hakoda, are imprisoned at a place called the Boiling Rock, the highest security prison in the Fire Nation. The Boiling Rock is the focus of a 2-part episode in Book 3, the 14th and 15th episodes, called The Boiling Rock Parts 1 and 2, which aired together on July 16, 2008. The episodes are a heist. Sokka and Zuko, working together for the first time, infiltrate the prison disguised as guards. They find Hakoda. They find Suki, the leader of the Kyoshi warriors, who had been captured earlier in Book 3 by Azula. The 4 of them, plus Sokka's father, escape on a hijacked airship. The escape sequence is one of the most thrilling action sequences in the show, and Sokka's character arc from Book 1, where he was a non-bending teenager who felt useless next to a flying avatar, finishes in this 2-parter. Sokka is the strategist. Sokka is the planner. Sokka is the one who saves his own father. The show has been quietly setting this up for 2 seasons. What you do not always notice on first watch is that Suki had been captured by Azula in episode 4 of Book 3, in an episode called The Beach. The show does not tell you that Suki was captured. The show implies it through Azula's casual mention, late in the season, that she has been holding Suki the entire time. Sokka when he hears this, realizes she's been alive and a prisoner for episodes. The audience realizes it at the same time. The show buried Suki's capture inside a flashback episode about Azula taking a vacation. You have to watch carefully to catch the breadcrumb. There is also the episode where the show watches itself. In Book 3, in the 17th episode, called The Ember Island Players, which aired on July 18, 2008, the team attends a play about themselves on Ember Island, a Fire Nation resort island. The play, as performed by a low-quality acting troupe, is bad. It is a cheap dramatization of the events of the previous 50 episodes, performed by actors who clearly do not understand the source material. Choff is played by an enormous strong man. Aang is played by a woman. Zuko is played by a stiff man with a permanent scowl. The team watches their entire arc replayed back to them with the wrong tone, with the wrong jokes, with the wrong emotional beats. The play takes liberties. The play makes Katara look weepy. The play makes Sokka stupider than he is. The play kills Aang at the end in a way the audience knows did not happen, but the team in the theatre does not yet know how the war will end. The episode is one of the strangest and most charming in the show. It is the show acknowledging itself, satirizing itself, breaking the fourth wall in a way that feels less like winking and more like the show watching itself with affection and slight embarrassment. The team comes out of the play emotionally bruised. Aang, watching himself die on stage, takes it personally. The episode ends with Aang flying off alone, brooding, which leads directly into the 4-part finale. The Ember Island Players is also the only episode of the entire show where the original Toph, the muscular boy version that was cut from production, appears canonically. The actor playing Toph in the play is the original Toph design, brought back as a meta joke. The team that designed the show in 2003 left a small gravestone for the original Toph inside the show that aired in 2008. You will only see it if you know the design history. If you do, the actor's first appearance is one of the few moments in television where a discarded character design is honored on screen by the people who discarded it. The 4-part finale, Sozin's Comet, aired on July 19, 2008, 4 episodes back-to-back, structured as a single feature-length film. The finale is the highest-rated television event Nickelodeon had ever produced for the network at that point. The episodes earned the show a Peabody Award, an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Animated Program, and a permanent place on the network's archive. By 2026, the show has won, between awards and rewatch ratings and best of lists, more recognition than the team had ever expected when they made the unaired pilot in 2003. There is one final detail almost no one mentions, and it lives in the supplementary material. Iroh, in The Legend of Korra, the sequel series, appears once. He has died between the two shows of natural causes. His spirit lives in the spirit world. Korra, the new avatar, meets him there. The spirit world version of Iroh runs a tea shop in the spirit world, the same way the alive version of Iroh ran the Jasmine Dragon in Ba Sing Se. But she greets Korra warmly. He helps her find her way back to the human world. The voice of Iroh in this scene is Greg Baldwin doing his Mako impression, 15 years after Mako died. The character he is playing is dead in the world of the show, alive in spirit. The actor is doing the voice of an actor who is also dead. The whole arrangement is a layer of grief built into the franchise itself. Iroh in the spirit world is a tribute to Mako that the show literalized. Korra, in the same scene, asks Iroh how it is that he is in the spirit world and not in any of the more usual afterlives. Iroh tells her, in a line that the show does not explain, that he could come and go from the spirit world while he was alive, and that when he died, he chose to stay there. He says, "The spirit world is not where you go when you die. It is where you go when you have made peace. This is the bottom of the iceberg, not because there is nothing further to find, but because everything below this is private. The show ends here. What is below the spirit world is what each viewer carries home. There are connections between the layers that, once you have descended far enough, you start to see going both directions. The show has been planting them since the first episode. The first time you watch, you do not catch them. The second time, you catch a few. The third time, you start to feel that the show was constructed by people who knew, from the beginning, the entire shape of what they were building. Here is what I mean. In the first episode of Book 1, the third episode actually, Called the Southern Air Temple, Aang and the team find a small statue room inside the abandoned temple. The room has statues of every previous avatar arranged in a spiral, hundreds of them reaching back through the centuries. Aang touches the statue of Roku. The statues, the room, the spiral are presented as a piece of background world building, the kind of thing you appreciate visually and then move past. In Book 3, in the episode about Roku and Sozin, the show returns to the same room. Roku himself is in the room in his statue form, and Aang stands in front of him. The room is the same. The architecture is consistent. The show in 2005 designed a room knowing what it was going to do with that room in 2007. The continuity reaches across years of broadcast. The same is true of Iroh's introduction. In the second episode of the entire show, called The Avatar Returns, which aired on February 21st, 2005, Iroh appears for the first time as a tubby old man playing Pai Sho on the deck of Zuko's ship while his nephew rages around him. The Pai Sho game in that scene looks decorative. It looks like a character beat. By Book 2, it is revealed that Pai Sho is the secret organizational signal of the Order of the White Lotus. By Book 3, Iroh has gathered the entire White Lotus to him and led them into Ba Sing Se. The Pai Sho game in episode 2 of season 1 was the show telling you in 2005 that this old man was a member of a secret society, 3 years before the show would explain what the secret society was. You did not know to look, the show knew. This is the kind of construction that, once you start seeing it, you cannot stop. The hair ornament Sozin gave Roku on his 16th birthday becomes the hair ornament Iroh gives Zuko in his prison cell. The same physical object, drawn the same way, passed across 4 generations. The headpiece is on screen for less than 10 seconds in Book 3. If you do not know what it is, you will not catch it. If you do, you realize the show has been holding that object in its memory for 50 episodes. The dragons that taught firebending are introduced as a culture-killing absence in Book 1 and Book 2. The Fire Nation has hunted the dragons to extinction. Iroh, the official records say, killed the last dragon in his youth, and the title Dragon of the West was given to him as a result. He carries the title throughout the show. In Book 3, in the episode The Firebending Masters, the 11th episode of Book 3, which aired on July 15th, 2008, Aang and Zuko meet the Sun Warriors, and the Sun Warriors reveal that 2 dragons survived. Their names are Ran and Shaw. Iroh did not kill the last dragon. Iroh told the Fire Nation he had killed the dragons in order to stop other firebenders from hunting them. He lied to the entire nation for decades to keep the dragons alive. The Sun Warriors knew. The dragons knew. Iroh paid for the lie by accepting the title that branded him as the killer of his own teachers, because he understood that the Fire Nation would not stop hunting the dragons unless the hunters believed the dragons were already gone. Iroh, in his early life, did this. The show drops it in passing in episode 11 of Book 3. Most viewers do not register the implication on first watch. Iroh has been a member of a quiet conspiracy of preservation for 40 years. The Pai Sho game is one piece of the same character, so is the lie about the dragons. So is the way he treats Zuko. The man on the hill with the picnic basket has been doing this his entire life. The 7th chakra moment, where Aang chooses Katara over the Avatar state, has its parallel in Iroh choosing the second sun. Both characters, at decisive moments, choose a specific person over an abstract role. Aang chooses Katara over the Avatar state. Iroh chooses Zuko over the Fire Lord throne, the war effort, and the entire mission of his life. The show does not draw the line between these choices. The line is there for whoever wants to see it. The show is structured around this kind of mirroring. Each main character has at least one parallel choice in another character's arc. Sokka, who never bends, mirrors Suki, who never bends. Top, who is blind, mirrors Iroh, who has lost a son. Each pairing is buried in scenes the show treats as small and ordinary. The most important of these mirrorings is the one between Zuko and Aang. The show is, structurally, a 2-protagonist show. Zuko gets as much screen time as Aang. Zuko has his own redemption arc, his own internal journey, his own mentor figure, his own moment of crisis, his own moment of coronation. Zuko is the second protagonist, and the show has been building him as the second protagonist since the very first episode, where the camera, in episode 1, gives you Zuko's first appearance from his own perspective on his own ship, with his uncle, with his crew, before any of the other named characters. Aang and Zuko meet for the first time in episode 2. They fight again in episode 3, they fight in some configuration for almost every episode of book 1. They fight in book 2, they fight in book 3 until Zuko switches sides. They fight twice more after Zuko switches sides, against external enemies. The relationship between Aang and Zuko is the spine of the show. The friendship that took 2 seasons to build, that began in opposition, is the show's resolution. Roku and Sozin, in the past, failed to keep their friendship through the change. Aang and Zuko, in the present, succeed. The show ends on this note. The final shot of the entire series, after the war is won, after Ozai is defeated, after Aang has restored balance, is Aang and Zuko, friends, standing together on the balcony of a tea shop in Ba Sing Se, looking at the world, with their team around them, with Iroh in the kitchen serving tea. The shot mirrors the ending of Book 1, where the team flies off into the sunrise at the end of an episode. The shot mirrors the opening of Book 1, where Aang is alone in an iceberg. The shot completes a rhyme that took 5 years of broadcast television to set up. You will see the rhyme on rewatch. You will not see it the first time. The show was made by a team that understood it would be rewatched, and structured the show so that each rewatch revealed more. There are still smaller layers between the flaw and the synthesis that the show keeps for the rewatchers. These are the layers where the show has been quietly arguing with itself for the entire run, and where, on a 5th or 6th pass, you start to hear the argument. The Siege of the North, which closes Book 1 in 3 episodes. The 18th, 19th, and 20th episodes of the first book is the first real piece of war filmmaking the show attempts. The Fire Nation, under Admiral Zhao, brings a fleet to the Northern Water Tribe during the closest pass of the full moon to the planet. Zhao's plan is to kill the moon spirit, the white koi fish in the Spirit Oasis, in order to permanently disable waterbending across the world. The plan works. He kills the fish. The moon goes red, waterbending stops, Aang is helpless on the ice, with his oldest abilities cut off, and the Fire Nation fleet is preparing to take the city. Princess Yu, the daughter of the Northern Water Tribe chief, has been alive only because the moon spirit, when she was a baby, gave her some of its life essence to save her from death. She has carried a piece of the moon inside her since she was an infant. The moon needs the essence back. Yu, knowing what this will cost her, walks into the Spirit Oasis, takes the dead koi fish in her hands, and gives it back her life. She dies. She becomes the moon. The moon comes back. Waterbending returns. The siege turns. Zhao is dragged into the spirit world by the ocean spirit, in retaliation for the killing of its mate. The Fire Nation fleet retreats. Sokka, who had been falling in love with Yd throughout the arc, watches her ascend into the sky. He cries for the rest of the episode without saying anything. Yeah, is still up there. Every full moon you see in the rest of the show is yeah. The show does not say this every time. You know. The Siege of the North is also where you start to see what Iroh is, when his disguise drops. Throughout Book 1, Iroh has been a cheerful old uncle who likes tea. In the moment, Zhao kills the moon spirit. Iroh, watching from the side, attacks Zhao without warning, demands the body of the fish, and saves Zhao's life when the rest of the Fire Nation forces try to kill him for the betrayal. Iroh, in this moment, reveals himself as a former general, a bender on a level above Zhao's, and a person whose moral commitments override his national identity. The reveal is not announced. It is shown through what he does, and through how casually the show stages it. He is, suddenly, the most dangerous firebender on screen. The next episode, he is back to being the cheerful old uncle the show trusts you to remember. You also start to notice on rewatches the role Zhong plays. Zhong is a deserter from the Fire Nation army who became Aang's first firebending teacher in Book 1, in a single mid-season episode called The Deserter. The 16th episode of Book 1. He refused to teach Aang at first, on the grounds that fire is a destructive element, and Aang was not ready to wield it without harming people. He was right. Aang, learning from him, accidentally burns Katara's hands in the only scene in the entire show where one main character physically harms another by accident. Aang refuses to firebend for the rest of Book 1 and most of Book 2. She has to overcome the trauma of that single accident before he can take Zuko on as his eventual firebending teacher. The whole arc of Aang's relationship to fire across the show begins with a teacher he abandoned because of an injury he caused. Chong is in the White Lotus. Chong helps liberate Ba Sing Se in the finale. The show drops his story like a small stone in a river, and the ripples reach all the way to the end. The Mechanist, the inventor of the Northern Air Temple, has a son named Teo, a paraplegic boy who flies on a glider who has the soul of an airbender even though he is not an airbender. Aang, when he first meets Teo, is angry that the temple has been repurposed by Earth Kingdom refugees. He sees them as squatters. He sees the modifications to the architecture as desecration. By the end of the episode, after watching Teo fly, after seeing the love the refugees have for the place, Aang relents. He says the Air Nomads built the temples to live in, and that the Earth Kingdom refugees in their own way are doing the same thing. He compares them to a hermit crab finding a new shell. The show is careful here. Aang, the Last Airbender, is the person who has the most reason to be angry at people occupying the temples of his murdered people, and the show makes him the person who lets them stay. The show is interested in this kind of generosity. It is not interested in possession. The temples are empty because the people are dead. Filling them with anything else, as long as the something else is alive and tries, is closer to what the temples were for than emptiness would be. The Drill, the 13th episode of Book 2, is the showcase episode for the show's animation team and one of the most thrilling action sequences in the series. The Fire Nation has built an enormous mechanical drill, the size of a small city, designed to bore through the outer wall of Ba Sing Se. The drill is approaching the wall. The team has hours to disable it. The episode is structured as a heist. Aang flies up to the top. Sokka crawls through the slurry pipe. Toph fights inside the gear assembly. Katara cuts through the metal hull with focused water. The episode ends with the drill collapsing under its own weight, just outside the wall, in a moment that the show stages with the visual logic of a controlled demolition. The drill is one of the show's set pieces, the kind of sequence the team designed to prove that Avatar could match anything Studio Ghibli or DreamWorks were producing in the same window. Most viewers do not register the technical achievement of the drill episode. The team did. So did everyone in animation production who watched it. The Serpent's Pass, the 12th episode of Book 2, is the show's other quiet showpiece. The team has to cross a flooded mountain pass with refugees while being hunted by an enormous water serpent. The episode involves Suki and the Kyoshi warriors meeting the team again. A flirtation between Sokka and Suki that begins what becomes one of the show's most enduring love stories, and a small subplot about a refugee couple expecting their first child. The baby is born during the crossing. Sokka, who is grieving you, has to deliver it. The episode ends with Sokka holding the newborn and naming her Hope, and crying because Hope is what he had lost when Yue became the moon. And now Hope is in his arms and is also a baby someone else's mother gave birth to in front of him on a mountain. The episode does not push the symbolism. It just lets you see it. You start to realize, on this layer, that the show is full of these small turns. They are the show's metabolism. You do not notice them all on first watch because they are passing through you continuously, 20 per episode, sometimes more. On rewatch, you start cataloging them. By the third or fourth pass, the show no longer feels like a story you are following. It feels like a place you are returning to. The show has become a pattern of small turns you remember by feel, not by plot. There is an episode in Book 3 called The Painted Lady, the third episode of Book 3, in which Katara, traveling through a polluted Fire Nation village whose river has been destroyed by upstream factories, dresses up as the local river spirit and starts secretly healing the sick villagers under cover of darkness. The villagers come to believe that the Painted Lady, who they had thought was a legend, has returned to save them. The real Painted Lady, the actual river spirit, eventually appears to Katara and thanks her for the impersonation. The show treats this as canonically true. The Painted Lady is a real spirit. She had been quiet for years. Katara woke her up by pretending to be her. The show again is interested in this kind of mechanic. Belief performed sincerely enough summons the thing it imitates. There is a school of theology around this idea. The show built a half episode around it. You start to suspect, the deeper you go, that the show is not really an action-adventure cartoon at all. The action is the genre. The cartoon is the medium. The thing inside the action and inside the cartoon is a 5-year argument about how civilizations sustain themselves, how trauma is carried, how friendship survives 100 years of state propaganda, how children can be raised to do harm and unraised by gentleness and time, how a man who loses one son can save another, how an old woman in a metal box can invent a new form of magic and use it for terrible purposes and still be a person. The show forces you to consider with care how the avatar is not a hero so much as a particular kind of obligation, and how the world reproduces itself in the smallest moments, in cabbages and tea and peisho and a psalm on a hill. The deepest fans understand this. They watch the show for the songs and the small moments. They do not watch it for the fights. The fights are good. The fights are the bait. The thing the show is doing is happening between the fights, and the team that built the show built it knowing where the watch time would actually live, decades after the broadcast. On rewatches, in the specific moments rewatchers come back to. Korra, the sequel, eventually returned to the Airbenders. There is an event in the second book of Korra called Harmonic Convergence, in which the spiritual energy that powers bending shifts globally, and people who were never benders before begin spontaneously developing airbending. Tenzin, Aang's son, the only surviving airbender of the second generation, suddenly finds himself the leader of a new generation of airbenders who appear from nowhere across the world. The Air Nomad people, in a sense, return. Not the original people, but the bending. The temples, by the end of Korra's third book, have all been refilled. The Air Nation is restored. Aang's choice, 100 years before, did finally bring his people back, in a form he could not have predicted. The reset is, by some readings, a softening of the original show's grief. The original show was clear that the genocide was permanent. Aang, in the show, was the last airbender. The future of the Air Nomads, in the original show's framing, was carried forward by Aang and by the Air Acolytes, a new order of non-bender students who learned the philosophy and the customs, but could not bend. The Korra retcon turns the genocide into a temporary state. Some fans love this, others find it diminishes the original's weight. You can hold either position. The show's text does not adjudicate. Bloodbending was eventually criminalized in the world of Korra. The technique that Hama invented, that Katara was forced to use and then never wanted to use again, became illegal under international law. The first major antagonist of Korra, a man named Yukoni, was a bloodbender. The criminalization came after his trial. The trial, which is shown in flashback in Korra's first book, features a young Toph as the chief of police of Republic City, Aang as the Avatar, Sokka as a councilman of the new United Republic, and Katara again in the courtroom. Yukon, on the stand, uses bloodbending in broad daylight without a full moon. To incapacitate everyone in the room, he is the first known bender powerful enough to bloodbend without a full moon. Aang, using energy bending, removes Yukoni's bending entirely. The show in Korra acknowledges that bloodbending, in the wrong hands, was a power on the level of nuclear weapons, and that the criminalization came too late. Yukoni is dethroned. Yukon's sons grow up to become Taralok and Amon, the antagonists of Korra's first book. Both inherited their father's ability, both used it. The show carries Hama's invention forward through 3 generations of antagonists, none of whom Hama would have known about, all of whom owe their power to her. Wan Shi Tong, the owl spirit, returned in Korra as well. He is briefly seen in Korra's second book, still alive in the spirit world, still keeping a library, still suspicious of mortals who come to him with selfish motives. The library has not been recovered from under the Siwong Desert. Wan Shi Tong is not interested in restoring it. The knowledge stays buried. The civilizations whose wisdom was in those books have been lost. The Mother of Faces appeared in the Search graphic novel, and is canonically the spirit who gave Ursa her new face during her exile. She is older than Ko. She is, in the spirit world's hierarchy, perhaps the eldest of the named spirits, second only to Rava and Vatu, the cosmic spirits of light and dark whose conflict began the first Avatar cycle. The Mother of Faces in Avatar lore is the spirit who gave faces to all human beings. Ko stole faces from her. Ko and the Mother of Faces are siblings by some readings. The show drops these names without making them legible, and then the supplementary material expands them into a cosmology. The cosmology is the deepest layer the franchise has built. There are essays online dedicated to mapping it. You can spend weeks down there. There is no end to that descent. What does this mean? What is the show actually about underneath all of this? The show is about cycles, avatar cycles, bending cycles, reincarnation cycles, the cycle of the comet, the cycle of seasons, the cycle of generations, the grandchild who carries the war the grandparents started, and the grandchild who has the chance to end it. Sozin's grandchild is Ozai. Ozai's grandfather is Ursa. Ursa's son is Zuko. Zuko's grandchildren will be born in peace. The show is asking, across all of this, whether the cycle is fate or whether the cycle is a choice. Whether what you inherit is what you become. Whether the second son can succeed where the first son failed. Whether the avatar after Roku can do what Roku could not. Whether the friend who loved Sozin can defeat what Sozin became. The show, in the end, says the cycle is a choice. It does not pretend the choice is easy. Aang, the protagonist, does not have a clean ending. He has lost his entire civilization, which he chooses to forgive a father who is about to commit a second genocide. He removes Ozai's bending instead of killing him, because killing him would have made him into the next Sozin. He keeps the line clean. The choice cost him. The choice was right. The choice did not bring back his people. The choice did not bring back Gyatso. The choice did not bring back Lu Ten. The choice did, however, change what came next. The Avatar Studios that exists today in 2026, the books being written about Koshi and Yangchen, the new animated content set decades after the original show, all of it is the world that Aang's choice created. You also realize, on this layer, that the show has been about grief from the first scene. A boy in an iceberg, a girl whose mother was killed, a boy whose father was at war, an old man whose son was dead before the show began, a prince whose mother was banished, a princess whose mother haunted her in mirrors, a blind girl whose parents loved her in a way she could not accept. The team is, as a unit, made entirely of children whose families have been broken by the same war, in different specific ways. The show does not tell you this directly. The show shows you the team eating noodles and laughing and running across rooftops, and the show buries the grief in single moments distributed across 61 episodes. And the cumulative effect, by the end, is that you have been watching a group of grieving children try to save the world. That is killing them, while making jokes about cabbages for 3 years of broadcast. That is the show. That is what it is. That is what it was always going to be, even when it was a 2003 pilot with the wrong voice cast and a fake Aang and a male Toph and a sister called Azul. There is a 40-second moment in Season 2, Episode 15 that aired on September 29, 2006. An old man climbs a hill at sunset carrying a picnic basket. He sets up a small altar. He places a portrait of his son, which he sees a song that breaks. 4 words appear on screen, in white at the end. They say, "In honor of Mako." The show built itself across 5 years around moments like this: the genocide, the volcano, the lake, the hill, the mirror, the throne room in the rain. Each one is 40 seconds long. Each one is a child crying in a way the show does not announce. Each one is the show telling you in a registered children's television was not supposed to be allowed to use, that the world is full of these moments, and that what you do with them is the only thing that ever matters. The reason Avatar holds up 2 decades after it aired is that the moments are still there. They have not aged, they will not age. They are why the show is on this iceberg. 10 weeks before that episode aired, on July 21st, 2006, Mako Iwamatsu died of esophageal cancer at his home in California. The team had to decide what to do with the character of Iroh. They could have written him out. They did not. They wrote him deeper. They built the entire 3rd book around him. They cast Greg Baldwin to match the voice. They never told the audience on screen what had happened. They put 4 words at the end of one segment, and they trusted the audience to find them. If you found something worth carrying away from this, subscribing helps more than you would think. Sleep well. I will see you in the next one.